A pale blue glow from the phone screen cast tense shadows across Lyria's face as she sat curled up at the edge of Riven's bed, deep in the stillness of midnight. Outside, the entire house had fallen silent. Only the whirring of a fan mixed with the rapid, uneven breaths and the wild, chaotic heartbeats of the two people in that cramped room. Lyria gripped Riven's hand tightly, her fingers trembling, her nails digging deep into his flesh. On her shoulder, the faint trace of his earlier kiss lingered. "I'm so scared. Riven, what if someone finds out?" Her voice was hoarse, cracking in the humid air, a confession that could never be taken back. Riven only bowed his head, his other hand wrapping around Lyria's waist, pulling her closer against his chest, unconcerned about the messy sheets, the scent of bare skin still mingling with the intoxicating heat that hung in the room. "Don't worry," he whispered, his lips brushing her forehead. "It's just you and me here." But his words did nothing to erase the trembling in Lyria's eyes, nor did they soothe the growing turmoil in his own heart. Out in the hallway, a faint creak echoed, someone shifting in their sleep in the dark. Lyria instinctively pulled away, but Riven held her even tighter, their breaths mingling, indistinguishable from each other, so that neither knew anymore whether it was fear or desire that was winning. That moment, the two of them tangled together in the dark, separated from their parents and family by only a few thin walls would haunt them forever. Tonight, a boundary had been crossed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Perhaps no one remembers exactly the first moment Riven and Lyria met. All they know is that, for as long as anyone can recall, the label sworn siblings has been a part of their lives. The two families were close long before, and after Lyria's parents passed away early, she moved in with Riven's family when she was 9. Back then, Riven was just a stubborn, shy teenager, never imagining that his life would be so changed by a sister with no blood ties. Those early years, the house was always filled with laughter. Lyria clung to brother Riven every step of the way, from their morning jogs around the park, their afternoons doing homework together, to those cold winter nights huddled under a giant blanket, whispering ghost stories to each other in the dark. Riven learned how to shelter and protect Lyria from nightmares and loneliness, while Lyria became the reason he opened up, learned to care more, and grew less selfish. Time went on, everything seemingly unchanged, until one summer. When Lyria turned 17, her body blossomed into womanhood almost overnight. Her long, silky hair, her fair, delicate skin, the look in her eyes that was both familiar and strangely irresistible, Riven found it harder and harder to look away every time their eyes met. Lyria began wearing thin nightgowns around the house, giggling as she climbed onto her brother's back, or wrapping her arms tightly around Riven's neck whenever she was spooked by a scary story. All of it became an unexpected trial for a man struggling to keep his composure. Riven started catching himself avoiding Lyria at sensitive times, like in the early morning when she emerged from the bathroom, hair still damp, a white shirt hugging every gentle curve. But the more he tried to look away, the more heightened all his senses became. Once, passing by Lyria's room, he noticed her door ajar. Yellow lamplight spilled over her bare legs, her small shoulders, the way she brushed her hair in front of the mirror. Those images burned into his mind for days. Lyria, for her part, seemed completely innocent, or maybe, she too wanted to see how brother Riven would react. Her teasing grew bolder each day. Sitting squarely on Riven's lap as they fought over the TV remote, looping her arms tightly around his neck so that their faces were just inches apart and her warm breath tickled his skin. On another occasion, during a birthday party, Lyria leaned in to whisper close to his ear, "If one day I'm no longer your little sister, what will you do?" That question made Riven's whole body flush with heat, though outwardly he only managed an awkward smile in reply. Sometimes their parents would joke, "You two are grown now, remember to keep your distance." But they never really thought it necessary. Because of social norms, family bonds, and the sibling relationship imposed by the adults, any unusual feelings were buried deep beneath layers of habit and loyalty. That summer, Riven had just graduated college and landed a job at a small company in the city. The pressure of adulthood, compounded by the growing turbulence caused by his little sister, left his mind in constant turmoil. Sometimes, just a gentle touch. A moment when Lyria rested her head on his shoulder watching a movie, or when her hand accidentally found his in the supermarket, was enough to make Riven's heart race out of control. That hot night, the family had to turn off the air conditioning because of a power outage. Riven lay restlessly on his bed, sweat dampening the back of his neck. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Lyria, wearing a short nightgown and bare feet, silently slipped inside. "Can't sleep, huh?" Her voice was a whisper, her eyes sparkling under the faint moonlight. Before Riven could answer, Lyria sat down at the edge of the bed, pulling her knees up and hugging them, her hair cascading over her cool, bare shoulders. She tilted her head, her gaze quietly following every breath he took, her hand absent-mindedly brushing against his sun-darkened back. At that moment, the room was filled only with their breathing, the sound of nighttime insects, and the warmth radiating from two bodies nearly pressed together. Riven closed his eyes, struggling to control himself, but his mind spun with the familiar scent of Lyria's hair. The sensation of bare skin brushing against bare skin, the thin veil of warmth between them. In that instant, a single movement, a subtle shift, a look that lingered too long, or a deeper touch, might have shattered all the boundaries they'd built up over so many years. But that night, both remained silent. Lyria gently leaned her head on Riven's shoulder, her eyes closing, her hand resting lightly on his chest. Riven quietly tightened his grip on Lyria's hand, as if afraid she might slip away at any moment. That was the first night he realized. Some boundaries, the more you try to resist, the more you long to cross. After that sleepless night, Riven thought things would return to normal. But that sensation, the delicate warmth of Lyria lingering on his shoulder, haunted him persistently. Every morning when he woke, he still saw her in the kitchen, wearing a short nightgown that barely covered her thighs, her hair tumbling down, her eyes half-closed in sleepy innocence, but always with that half-hidden, playful smile on her lips. All it took was an accidental glance, and Riven would feel breathless, his heart pounding for reasons he couldn't explain. Lyria remained as carefree as ever. If anything, she seemed even bolder than before. There was a time she walked into the bathroom just as Riven was about to leave, his towel still loosely wrapped around his body. "I'm just grabbing my shampoo." Lyria laughed, her eyes trailing over his bare skin with a new kind of curiosity, then quietly brushing past him to reach for her things, leaving behind a fresh, cool scent and an electric shiver that ran the length of his body. Riven froze, struggling to keep any reaction from showing, even as something inside him burned quietly out of control. Those accidental touches became more frequent, more intense. Sometimes it was her arm thrown over his shoulder as they walked together at night. Sometimes it was her nonchalantly changing her shirt in the living room just a few steps away from him. Riven couldn't tell if Lyria was truly oblivious or if she was testing him, but each day the space between them seemed thinner, more fragile, ready to break. There was a day when everyone else was out, leaving just the two of them at home. Lyria sprawled out on the sofa, her bare legs draped across Riven's lap as they watched a movie together. Each time she shifted, her soft knee pressed up against a sensitive spot on his thigh. Riven tried to keep his eyes glued to the screen, but he couldn't help stealing glances at every subtle movement of her body. The thin t-shirt clung to her shape, and the tiny, worn-out shorts exposed her long, sun-kissed legs. Lyria pulled the blanket up to her waist, then snuggled her head into Riven's lap, her small hand gripping his arm as if letting go would send her tumbling into the abyss. On another night, a torrential rainstorm hit. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Lyria tiptoed into Riven's room, carrying a thin blanket. "I'm scared of the thunder. Can I sleep with you tonight?" Her voice trembled, her gaze uncertain. But when Riven nodded, Lyria quickly climbed onto his bed, curling herself into his embrace just like when she was a child. This time, though, she was no longer that wide-eyed little girl. Her skin was feverish, her slender waist pressed against his hips, her breath fragrant and warm on Riven's bare chest. They lay still, hearing nothing but the pounding of each other's hearts in the dark. Lyria's hand unconsciously traced down Riven's arm, her fingertips playing with the calluses he'd developed from the gym. Riven tried desperately to hold himself together, only daring to gently squeeze her shoulder, terrified that a single move could push everything over the edge. That night, the thunder and lightning flared outside the window. Each flash illuminated Lyria's face, revealing eyes that sparkled with embarrassment, curiosity, and something deeper he dared not name. Sometimes, she shifted, almost pressing her entire body against him, her legs wrapping around his under the thin blanket. In the cramped space, their breaths mingled, and it became impossible to know whether fear or primal instinct was taking over. In that moment, a single tilt of the head, a whispered confession, could have ignited a fire that nothing would extinguish. Yet in the end, there was only silence and the muffled sounds of ragged breathing. When morning came, Lyria was still lying with her head on Riven's arm, their bodies tangled together, the blanket a chaotic mess at their feet. She stirred, rubbed her eyes, then smiled sweetly. "Thank you, I slept really well last night." Riven just smiled back, hiding the turmoil churning inside. But from that moment, he knew the sibling boundary they had tried so hard to maintain was truly blurring, and nothing could stop the feelings growing stronger between them each day. After the night they shared a bed during the rainstorm, all the feelings between Riven and Lyria grew even more tangled and haunting. Riven couldn't erase from his mind the image of that soft body, the sensation of her legs wrapped around him through the night, those accidental touches that felt all too real. He tried to act normal every time he saw Lyria, but every small movement of hers seemed to set fire to his skin. The longing and craving only grew day by day, becoming an addiction that only this girl could satisfy. Lyria was no longer as innocent as before. It was as if she sensed every shift inside him and became more proactive in the smallest gestures. Her late-night messages took on a teasing edge, sometimes just a heart emoji, sometimes a selfie with her lips pouting and her eyes inviting. "Brother Riven, come home early tomorrow, I have a surprise for you." Those playful messages were enough to keep Riven up all night, tossing and turning, imagining all sorts of things. One afternoon, another sudden downpour arrived. Their parents were busy and would come home late, leaving just the two of them in the house. Lyria rummaged through the closet for a coat, hurried to the door but suddenly stopped, taking off her outer jacket, left only in a thin tank top hugging her curves, her skin glowing under the warm yellow light. "I'm all wet and cold." She looked straight into Riven's eyes, without a trace of embarrassment, her tangled hair plastered to her shoulders, rainwater rolling down her collarbone. Riven stood frozen, his eyes drawn to every drop of water on Lyria's skin, his chest swelling with a mix of tenderness and possessive desire. They sat together on the sofa, Riven handing Lyria a towel, but she didn't rush to dry herself. Instead, she gently pulled his hand to her shoulder, whispering, "Will you help me dry off?" Riven's hand trembled, his fingertips brushing her soft skin, feeling every bit of warmth beneath that thin fabric. The air in the room thickened, filled only with the sound of rain against the window and their breaths growing quicker and heavier. Lyria closed her eyes, leaning her head on his shoulder, both hands clutching the hem of his shirt. Riven knew he shouldn't do anything more, but his heart refused to obey. His hand slowly slid along her back, feeling her trembling breaths, the wild beat of her heart beneath that delicate skin. In that moment, every distance vanished. There was only pure instinct between two bodies craving to be closer. Suddenly, the phone rang from the hallway, making them both jump. Lyria quickly sat up, cheeks flushed, eyes darting away, while Riven struggled to steady his breathing, his heart thundering as if it might leap from his chest. "Probably Mom calling." Lyria stammered before hurrying upstairs, leaving the air heavy with her warm scent and a suffocating wave of regret and longing. That night, after the family had gone to bed, Lyria unexpectedly texted Riven, "I can't sleep. If I come to your room now, will you send me away?" A short message, but it sent heat flooding through Riven. He replied with just one word, "No," and a few minutes later, his door quietly opened and Lyria slipped inside. She wore a thin sweater, barefoot, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I just want to hold you for a little while. Is that okay?" Riven opened his arms, and Lyria dove straight into his chest. They lay together in silence, listening only to the sound of each other's hearts, neither saying a word. His hand wrapped around her waist, the scent of her hair mingling with their warm breaths. That night, they didn't cross the final line, but both understood. There was no turning back now. The next morning, as Lyria returned to her room, Riven could still feel the warmth on his arm where she had rested. His mind spun with scenes that had yet to happen, unfulfilled desires, and a growing fear swelling inside his chest. From this moment on, all the secrets began. There are nights when all reason, every barrier painstakingly built, suddenly collapses with just a look, a gentle touch, or perhaps simply because, after so long, neither could resist their instincts any longer. That night, the city was deep in its rainy season. Outside, rain fell in long, relentless waves, wind swept through the open window, making the room unusually cold. Lyria entered Riven's room just past midnight. She didn't knock, didn't say a word. She simply closed the door softly behind her and stood there, shivering a little from the cold and from what was about to happen. She wore a thin jacket, her hair loose over her shoulders, her eyes red as if she'd been crying, yet her gaze was filled with a strange determination. "Can't sleep?" Riven sat up, not yet able to say more before Lyria quietly moved closer, her bare feet soundless on the carpet. She sat down at the edge of his bed, silent for a long while, then suddenly spoke in a trembling voice. "I'm scared. I don't want to be your little sister anymore." That confession froze the air in the room. Riven stared at her, stunned, as her eyes locked on his, deep, so deep, hiding nothing now. "What do you mean?" he whispered. "I'm tired of holding back, tired of pretending nothing's happening. I want to love you, as a real woman loves a man." Lyria spoke through tears, her cheeks streaked wet, but her hands gripped Riven's, refusing to let him go. The two of them fell silent, hearing only the rain outside and the sound of their own ragged breaths. Riven couldn't fight it anymore. All the repression, fear, and longing inside him shattered when he saw her eyes, heard her sobbing in his arms. He pulled Lyria close, holding her tightly. Their breaths merged, hot and trembling. "I love you too, I have for a long time. I was only afraid of hurting you. I'm not afraid of anything, as long as you don't let me go." Lyria whispered, her lips quivering as she pressed them to his in the gentlest of kisses, a kiss that broke all boundaries. Their first kiss was no longer an accident, no longer a test, but a complete confession. Riven drew Lyria onto the bed, lips against lips, arms encircling the body that had once been his little sister, but now was the woman he desired most in the world. Clothes slipped off Lyria's shoulders, each tangled piece falling to the floor, leaving her skin warm, soft, and trembling beneath his hands. Every sense felt ablaze. Lyria's breath mingled at Riven's neck, their chests pressed tightly together, her arms wrapped fiercely around him, drawing him closer, ever closer. A faint moan escaped her throat, fluttering between their kisses. Riven's hands moved slowly along her bare back, feeling each breath, every shiver of skin as he whispered her name in her ear. "You're beautiful, Lyria." She arched her body beneath his touch, legs wrapped around his waist, her small frame melting into the embrace of the man she had longed for all those years. There was nothing but the sound of breathing, the rain against the window, the soft sounds of skin against skin, and the tender noise of passion that had been suppressed for far too long. Riven kissed every inch of Lyria's body, feeling the innocence mingling with instinct as she shivered under him. She clung to him, leaving faint red marks down his back, her quiet cries echoing with every caress that found her most sensitive places. That night, everything blended together. They cried, they laughed, they loved each other as if for the first and last time, as if only tonight, only this moment truly belonged to them. When the storm of passion calmed, Lyria lay with her head on Riven's chest, her cheeks still damp with tears. He gently stroked her hair, kissing her forehead for a long, long time. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We crossed that line together, didn't we?" Lyria only nodded in silence, her eyes shining with happiness and worry for what tomorrow would bring. Outside, the rain had not stopped. But in that little room, for the first time, they were no longer brother and sister, but two lovers, lost in a passion so fierce they no longer cared about the world. After that fateful night, the world around Riven and Lyria seemed to change color. They still lived under the same roof, still played the roles of brother and sister in front of the adults. But behind closed doors, there were glances, touches, hurried moments of love that neither could resist. Every glance, every laugh, every seemingly innocent stroke of the hair became a signal, an unspoken invitation that only the two of them could understand. Riven often woke in the middle of the night, his heart racing just from the slight sound of his door moving. On evenings when their parents came home late, Lyria would sneak into his room, her soft body sliding into his arms in the darkness. They kissed each other passionately, hands endlessly exploring every contour, skin pressed together under the thin blanket as they tried desperately to stifle their moans and ragged breaths so no one outside would know the truth. Some nights, Lyria had to clamp her hand over her mouth when pleasure became overwhelming, while Riven buried his face in her shoulder, biting softly into her pale skin to suppress any sound. Other times, when everyone was busy in the kitchen or out in the yard, Riven would pull Lyria into the upstairs bathroom, locking the door tight. Steam fogged the mirror, their bodies clinging to each other in the cramped space, the sound of running water mixing with pounding hearts and breaths growing ever more frantic. Lyria clung to his shoulders, her legs wrapped around his hips, her voice reduced to broken, scattered cries that left Riven burning with each memory. Yet beneath the secret happiness was a constant fear. Just a footstep in the hall, an unexpected call, and they would have to hurriedly fix their clothes, erase every trace, bury all emotion deep inside. Every dinner became a test. Avoiding each other's gaze, answering their parents' harmless questions, the moments when Lyria nearly let Riven slip instead of brother, all of it felt like traps, waiting to snap shut. Once, everything almost fell apart. It was a Sunday afternoon, the whole family cleaning the living room together. Lyria sneaked upstairs to grab a book from Riven's room, not knowing their mother was just coming up the stairs. The door wasn't fully closed, and their mother froze when she saw Lyria emerge, her hair messy, her cheeks flushed. "What were you doing in Riven's room?" Lyria stumbled over her answer, but Riven quickly came out to save her. "I just asked her to grab the phone bill for me, Mom." Their mother said nothing more, but the suspicion in her eyes kept both Riven and Lyria awake for nights afterward. The more they hid, the more suffocating it became. Lyria began to worry constantly, sometimes bursting into tears in Riven's arms. I'm scared that someday everyone will find out, and then we won't be together anymore." Riven held her tight, whispering comfort, though he too was haunted by the same fear. Loving in the dark meant happiness only existed behind closed doors. During the day, they had to pretend to be strangers, unable to look at each other for too long or touch in front of anyone. Every stolen moment made their passion burn more fiercely. On some afternoons, when everyone else was out, Riven would pull Lyria onto the bed, stripping each layer of clothing from her body, kissing every inch of her skin, listening to her muffled moans beneath the blankets. They loved each other with abandon, as if tomorrow it would all end, as if this was the last time they could truly belong to one another. But the closer they became, the harder it was to endure the pressure. The questions, the looks, the moments when they were almost caught forced them to face a choice. Continue hiding and living in fear, or step out of the shadows to face everything together. On yet another rainy night, as they lay entwined on the narrow bed, Lyria broke down in tears, her voice trembling. "If I have to leave this house to be with you, would you dare?" Riven was silent for a long time, then held her so tightly it felt as if they might melt into each other forever. "As long as you go with me, anywhere is fine." The next morning they both knew there wasn't much time left to hide. They would have to either let go or risk everything for love. The greater the pressure, the more intense their love became. In the days that followed, every moment together felt so precious it was almost suffocating. Lyria was no longer the innocent little sister she once was. In Riven's eyes, she had become a grown woman, someone who understood love and dared to fight for her own happiness. The decision was made on a cold, early winter morning. After a sleepless night, Lyria sat in Riven's arms, her eyes red from crying yet shining with determination. "I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to only love you in the shadows. If I have to choose, I'll choose you, no matter what anyone thinks." Her words pierced through every fear in Riven's heart, but they were also the cure for all the anguish he'd carried for so long. He embraced her, pressed a gentle kiss to her lips, making a promise he meant with all his soul. "We won't have to hide anymore. I'll talk to our parents. Even if they don't accept us, I'll still stay by your side." That evening, for the first time in his life, Riven sat down across from his parents, his hand tightly clutching Lyria's beneath the table. Everyone's eyes were wide with shock, confusion, then coldness. His mother burst into tears, his father sat in heavy silence for a long time. Riven had to confess everything. His true feelings, everything that had happened, the torment that had weighed on him for so long. Lyria stood as well, tears streaming down her face, but never letting go of his hand for even a moment. No one accepted it easily. The questions came in a flood, judgmental eyes thickened the air. But this time, neither of them ran. Riven stood up for Lyria with all the strength he had, and she simply leaned quietly against his shoulder, finding an odd peace amid the chaos. After that night, everything changed in the house. The warm, affectionate glances of old disappeared, and the carefree laughter was gone. But in the middle of the storm, Riven and Lyria found a peace they'd never known. There were no more lies, no more living in the dark, no more fear when they were close. Time passed, and the wounds within the family gradually healed. Their parents no longer opposed them so harshly, friends stopped gossiping. Finally, Riven decided to move out and live on his own, and Lyria went with him. The day they moved into their small apartment in the city, the sun broke through the clouds. Lyria stood in the middle of the living room, spun in a wide circle, then hugged Riven from behind, whispering into his ear. "I've never felt this free before." Those first nights in their new home, with no more barriers, no more fear of being discovered, the two of them made love with a wildness meant to make up for all those hidden years. Laughter echoed through their rooms, moans of satisfaction blending into the warm golden lamplight. There were only the two of them now, free and happy. Of course, life is never just roses. Outside, there were still curious glances, there were still whispered rumors, and uncertainty about the future always lingered. But now, both Riven and Lyria had grown strong enough to face it all together. They didn't need the perfect ending of a movie, only to be themselves, to love each other openly, to live together without fear. One spring day, Lyria stood on the balcony, gazing down at the bustling traffic below, her head resting softly on Riven's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, gently whispering, "Thank you for choosing me." Lyria smiled, her eyes shining like the morning sun. "I'll keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life." That story, though unfinished in the eyes of the world, was, within their hearts, the happiest ending they could ever write for themselves.